Hey guys, so good to see you. I feel like it's been honestly forever since I've been on one of these calls. So a big shout out to all the coaches for covering. We're gonna discuss tonight the postseason, preseason, off-season, whatever you like to call it. I don't like to call it off-season personally. I always like to call it preseason because you're always thinking ahead to what's to come. And the reason I got into that thinking is I feel like when we're just completely taking time off, we're not developing at all. And I think most of us hate time off as it is. So we kind of go into a funk when it's time to kind of shut things down and go into a funk because we feel like we're not moving the ball forwards at all towards being prepared for next year. Whereas essentially that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to set ourselves up for the best 2023 season. So first things first, the question we get, and I'm sure we covered it last week, is should I take a break? How long should that break be? What does that break look like? So first is, should I take a break? Well, the question is, do you need a break? Both physically, emotionally, mentally, based on kind of your family's schedule. Have you been putting things off to the side because you're like, I just need to get past this race and then I will get to that? So let's answer that one first. I think a lot of us do that. We kind of train for that last Ironman and we start putting family stuff off to the side. And we say, just as soon as I'm done with this race and I'm recovering, that is going to be my priority to kind of get things aligned. And so, yes, you probably need to kind of take a break to kind of realign life and get caught up. So that would be a good reason to shut things down for a week or two. Okay. Now, number two is, physically, have you worn your body down completely through the season? You've really been getting after your goals. You really haven't taken a break. Your body, your joints, your ligaments, etc., just needs a bit of a break to re-heal, reset before you kind of go at it again for the next year. That could be you, and that's a reason to take some downtime. Okay. Emotionally, you're just wiped out from like getting after it every day, that alarm clock going off. You just need a break to sleep in, again, to be with family. Yes, you probably need a little bit of a break. And I think that the time off really depends on each person. You see it written about many times in articles about most of the pros will take like 1 to 2 weeks off, 2 being the most common number. And then you have 2 weeks of pretty much unstructured or very easy aerobic training to get your body ready to train again. That's kind of the key component of how do we come back. But it's really loosely dependent on you. Now, if you are someone that you've gone through a bit of a season, you maybe really haven't trained that much. So just maybe this is your outlet. You work and you train, 10 to 12 hours a week, and you really don't feel like you have that much fatigue from body, emotional, etc. season. You've balanced it all really well. This may be you, and you don't actually need to take an off season. You actually thrive very well on the consistency and the momentum of training. And you would just maybe roll into preparation for next year. So that you could be in that camp as well. So does any of the coaches want to kind of add to timeline, or who wants to take an off season and who should not? Coach Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just be honest with yourself too. I think that's the hardest thing as an athlete, to look inward and say, where am I at? Because you get to the end of this point, especially when you're training for Ironmans, where you're so fit and you're just like, I want to keep going. But that can lead to a very dangerous road in terms of overtraining. And so if you're looking to build longevity in this sport, taking, that time to just be honest and say, I've built up a lot of fitness. Because I'll be honest, Ironman training is not a sustainable lifestyle. When you build to an Ironman, you are peaking and then you're coming back down. Okay. So you can get fitter as you go, but the overall last 3 month or 2 into an Ironman, that's not a sustainable lifestyle. So to try to hold on to that can lead to overtraining very quickly. So number one is be honest with yourself on where you're at and what you need to do. And then number two, I think Natasha mentioned it, like she said, the pros commonly 2 weeks of off season, like not training, and then 2 weeks of unstructured training. That's a month. So I think as an athlete, you sometimes get caught up of like, all right, it's been a couple of days, I got to get going. The pros are taking a month off, and this is their livelihood. So I just like that's something that not everyone's doing that, but just common, I think it's, you lose it sometimes that you need that extra time just to take off. So 2 weeks, it can be up to a month of like unstructured training, but that's going to lead to longevity, I think, as we move into the off season.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think we have a couple athletes in here, and Julz, I'm going to get you next, Julz. We do have a couple athletes here that maybe joined us mid-season, and maybe you weren't really even training half the season, and now you've really just gotten going. You've just learned how to train, and you really have some good momentum going. You might be someone that does not need to take an off season right now. Again, it's so dependent on the person. Okay, Julz, you had something to add?
Yeah, going off of what Mike was saying, where you have to look inward on yourself, the last thing, and you can think about it like this, the last thing you want is to burn out before you even get to the 2023 season. Because a lot of people will continue, ride that high and continue trying to train at Ironman level through the off season or the preseason, and they get to the following season and they're already burned out. And so, having that conversation with yourself, like, oh, I just did 2 half Ironmans in the fall and then Ironman at Arizona, I should probably take a little break and not continue to try to train at that same level. So it's just about being honest with yourself. So that's just something to think about, is making sure you are not burning yourself out before you even get to the following season and taking that 2-week break.
Awesome. Yeah. And yeah, so I think just asking questions on yourself, if you don't know, ask your coach. The coach will tell you like, hey, you have been hitting it hard, take some time. Another person to ask is your spouse. If they're like, yeah, you are irritable, you need to take some downtime just to get caught up on life, they will give you some honest feedback. What's funny, I'm looking at Heather and David over here and they're looking at each other. I think that's really funny. But yeah, Steve was always kind of a good barometer of like, you do need to take some time. And then all of us are so driven, and this is key. When we take time off, say, I'm going to progress in these things, and it's not training, but I'm going to progress in getting maybe better time management, catching up on sleep. So I'm going to progress my health because I'm sleeping more, maybe kind of getting a plan in place for nutrition and what I'm going to do kind of when I get back to training, or even starting now, so that you don't feel like you're just kind of wasting away. I think everyone gets into a bit of an emotional funk when you take downtime, because you stop doing everything and you really just don't take care of yourself. And this is the reason we got into sport in the first place. But if you feel like you're making gains on all these things that's going to support incredible training, well, then off season makes sense. Okay. Coach Mike, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to add, you brought up a good point. Like, if you're somebody who came into this, halfway through the year, I think we all kind of get caught up in this routine of like the year, your off season has to be in this winter time period, right? Like this November, December, and that doesn't have to be the case. If you're somebody who's going to say race early in 2023, you may not be in your off season. Your off season may be in the summer of 2023, right? You really got to look at your race schedule and say, where am I trying to peak? And then when am I going to take a break, right? And so you don't have to fall into this calendar year of like, it's the off season and we're building and we're racing. You have to look at your personal schedule, your race schedule, and say, when do I want to peak? And then when do I want to recover?
Awesome. Okay. So what do we do when we look at this time? I look at this as an uninterrupted period of time to grow as an athlete versus prepare for a race. Okay. Once we get into the January months, you're now already looking at doing race specific training preparation for early season races. Ironman Texas. I mean, you're now just over 12 weeks out from an Ironman Texas, and we're getting already into our Ironman block. That is too late to prepare for Ironman Texas. We have to set things in place so that we can be prepared to do the Ironman Texas block. And we also, if there's maybe areas of weakness that you guys need to work on, that can't be done in that final race specific phase. That race specific phase is there so that you can prepare for the demands of the race. If you want to improve in certain areas, you do that ahead of time. And so I just say you develop versus prepare, and you look to improve versus extend. So a lot of times we look at, hey, we want to be faster, be stronger. And now how can I extend that to carry over to the distance of the race? Again, that is now, the time's now. And so other questions I want to ask you guys to ask yourself is, what do I need to do to become better as an athlete? And that can be specifically to swim, bike, run, strength, Or are there areas that are letting me down as it pertains to nutrition, sleep, time management, pre-activation of workouts, the mental side of training, weight loss? That now's the time to really pick those things apart. Okay, so that's on the personal development side. And then for those that are on the lead category, you might be looking at hey, I want to qualify for Kona. I want to become a professional triathlete. You also have to be asking yourself, well, what are my limitations of getting there? Okay, and you have to say, be honest with yourself and say, okay, all the girls are swimming 20 minutes faster than me. I probably, in order for me to even have a shot of getting to that level, I really need to prioritize that discipline. And now's the time to do it, because again, once you get into the season, we have to manage all three sports and balance it out in every week consistently. And we never otherwise have a time to say, hey, we're going to go all in and test out, hey, if we swim more frequently, if we swim harder and kind of maintain the rest, can we improve and make that jump as a swimmer? And a lot of times that is the case. And so I want to get to kind of how can we use this time is having the chat with your coach as far as what your goals are, and then saying, okay, I do need to become a better swimmer. Someone asked in the questions, maybe now's the time to block train. And that you see a lot of athletes do that. They're getting into the season. It's a little easier on their body to kind of come back into training, and they'll focus and say, okay, we've never swum 5-6 times a week. We have never maybe had the intensity of 3 hard swims a week, balancing bike run. Let's try that. And let's see if that's going to move the needle on the swim. And typically it does. And what I've seen happen is you maybe drop a base interval on your swim. So what that means is, like, you were coming in at 130s, now you're coming in at 125s, established this through this block. And now it's easier to maintain as you now get back into bike and run, and you couple that in to your training. And then as you, the swim, you just look to maintain at that point. But maybe if you just did all 3 sports at the same time, that big of a jump might not have happened, and you're just kind of edging things along. Does that make sense to you all? I feel like I'm not quite explaining myself as best as possible, and that's the same for like all sports. Mike, do you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, as you get into block training and you're focusing on something, it's very easy to kind of get caught up in the fact that, like, it's going to get hard. So I say this with a little precaution, because I've seen the block training for like the bike block that Natasha just built, and it's tough. And it's okay. I think a lot of times when we're just periodizing like race prep and we're doing all 3, we get so good at hitting all of our workouts, right? We nail every single one. But sometimes in block training, what you're going to find is, because you're focused on one sport over the other 3, you're probably going to fail a workout at some point. And that's okay, because we always talk about it. We don't know where that line is until you fail, right? Now, if you're consistently failing workouts, then it's probably something you need to talk with your coach about. But if you're 2 weeks into a bike block build and you're doing, 4-minute VO2 max intervals, right, and you make it through 3 of them and you can't hit the 4th one, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. We just found your line. And that's what we're trying to do in block training sometimes, is see how far we can push you before you hit your breaking point. And then we come back and we say, okay, there it was. How do we get better moving forward? So just know that as we go into like sport specific block training, that is something that you're probably going to experience, and it's okay. It's not the end of the world. Katie and I were talking about that today. So I just wanted to make sure we touched on that, as a lot of people transition into that type of training over the next month or 2.
Yeah, and then also know, as we are specifically trying to improve one thing, it's okay not to improve on the others. And you will find that when you do get to the other sports, the crossover effect of fitness will carry over. You just basically have to get your rhythm back doing those sports. So too many times people are really concerned about the 2 other sports, but they're not pushing themselves hard enough on the one sport that they're really looking to improve. I see some questions coming in, so we're going to address them. Do you advise setting specific time improvement goals for next season by sport? It's such a tough one. I find like setting an exact wattage goal slightly arbitrary. If that's something that motivates you, then awesome, you can do that. But it's like, are we improving? Is at the end of the day is let's set a baseline, and then each week are the numbers getting better? And every workout is a baseline. Every workout is a test. And where you can see that if you're hitting certain power, is it easier? Is your heart rate lower at that power? And then the next week, is it easier? Is your heart rate lower at the power? And then as soon as you see that the couple's enough, well, then we're going to increase your power targets to hit. And so every week you can see yourself getting better. But saying like, I have to, for this to be a success, I'm at 220 watts and I want to get to 270 watts in 2 months. Well, I just think that's slightly arbitrary. I think everyone's going to improve at a different level. It just, are we improving is the key. And so I actually have shied away like specific time targets. It's just like, let's just do things better than we did it the week before. Did anyone have anything to add to that? And then I can answer some of these other questions. How do you know which sport you should do block training on? Well, it depends on what you want to focus on. If you want to become a better swimmer and you see that as a weakness or a limitation from your goal, that could be something you focus on. Maybe you're just like really excited to run right now. It's running season. You can do running races and you just want to see, even though you're a good runner, you want to see if you can become a better runner. That might be something you need to focus on. But at the end of the day, we usually block train on the sport that we're weakest at, the one that is stopping us from reaching our goals or having a certain placement. How do we train to improve the beer mile? Was that a question? I'm not going to answer that question. I drink too. Okay, we're going to come back. Improving one sport, we answered that. Now, for a lot of us who don't particularly need to block train, maybe we've really enjoyed the routine of swim, bike, run, and we like the variance of the week, right? Where we know we're doing our strength training and bike and swim on those certain days. It's just, how can we do those better? How can we time manage better? And then how can we add to it in certain ways? And so I always like to liken training as a jigsaw puzzle with my life. How can I move things around to optimize that session and optimize recovery for the next session? So something I love to do was like switch out. Hey, I have always done my swim second. But what in turn happened was I was always really tired from my swim, and the swim was affected negatively compared to the other sports. So for the next month, I'm going to try to put my swim first and totally like change up my schedule and see how does that improve my swim and how does it affect my bike and run that's subsequently to come. And then I always say, like, do you need to shift or add in a run, a recovery spin or a recovery run? Is that going to set you up better for the next day? Do you want to talk to your coach about like shifting the days? So maybe you're in a certain routine and you want to see if I shift this key bike workout a day sooner, because I have found that I am more recovered on this day. I'm ready to attack this workout better because I'm not into the demands of the work week. Try that. Like, now is the time to try jigsaw everything around so that when you come to the season, it's time to do race prep. Everything is set, you're in your routine, and now you've just got to execute on those preparation sessions. Okay, Andrea and Keeghan, do you guys have anything to add to off-season stuff from what I've spoken to about?
No, I mean, you've done a really good job summing it all up. I think the big one is just focusing on your weak spot. And to determine your weak spot is really like, if you're trying to place top in your age group or you're trying to compare yourself to others, where's the biggest deficit? For me, it'd be like looking at my bike. Like, I know I can swim with the solid group, but for me, like knowing the bike, if you can't bike, you're not in the race. So for me, it's always focusing on the bike. Even though I'm a good runner, I'll still focus on the run block, but the big thing for me is focusing on the bike. So a lot of times for me to determine what I need to work on is also dependent on where the competition is crushing me. And so that's where I really try to take a look, and then also do the math as well. If you make this much gains in your bike, what does your time end up? Or if you make this much gains in your transitions, I mean, that's another one that people don't really look at. I mean, transitions is huge. And then obviously we've talked before about lifting. I mean, maybe gaining strength is a huge one, because that's going to help you not get injured, or even you can increase your FTP by lifting. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can go about it. And I just would recommend talking to your coach and seeing where you can make the biggest gain, or where the most bang for your buck is in the off season.
Another thing is definitely like, taking that time for your mental health and everything too. And like, the holidays and off season or preseason coming up, like enjoy those holidays, enjoy your family, because during the seasons when you want to push, not Christmas Eve, like take that time.
You don't need to do 20 miles on a treadmill on Christmas.
Yeah.
You're not going to get that big of a gain from that. So like, choose your battles for sure. So I'd say enjoy the holidays, enjoy yourself. Have the extra piece of turkey on Thanksgiving. Like, it's
the best in the world do that. Like everyone thinks they're all
killing themselves 24/7. No, I mean, the top of the people, like, Mike said earlier, they'll go on a vacation for a month and they won't even touch their bikes or anything. So definitely, take that time when you need it.
Yeah. And then you guys, that's perfect. And I just want to say to that, you guys have to communicate with your coaches. Like, we don't know how you guys are feeling. And so if you are someone that wants to back off, I always feel like now's the best time to back off the volume, because you have to add in volume as you get closer to an Ironman. That is a prerequisite to be prepared for an Ironman. Why not we back off volume, do everything extremely intently? Is that a word? Intently? Have intention in every single workout that you do. Have specific gains that you're looking to make in that short period of time, and then spend that extra time, taking care of the details. I think if all of you are honest and you looked at all the disciplines, but everything supporting, you should be able to write a list of things you need to improve, and maybe don't take them all on at once. Maybe say, for right now, I'm really just going to focus on being very intentional about my strength. It's something that everyone kind of puts to the side during the season and say, I'm going to prioritize that. And then once you've got that in order with all the other disciplines, say, okay, I'm really going to prioritize my nutrition, get that in order. And then any other self-help stuff, again, to support your training, I feel like is neglected and is actually the game changer of elite performance and our performance. It's the details. Okay. Any coaches want to add something, and I can end on running races? I feel like we need to talk about running races. I keep getting it. Go.
I was going to say off-season stuff too. As you communicate with your coach, there can be certain things too that, like, when you're in a race prep specifically, I think the motivation can be there, right? Because you have this thing that you're building towards, and you kind of know what's coming, right? You get into that routine. So talk to your coach and say, identify those deficiencies, what you want to improve on, and then ask them, how are we going to do this? Because if like, okay, I'm in a 3-week bike block, or, I'm going to do this swim block, like maybe that these next 3 weeks are going to be tough, but then I'm going to get a recovery week afterwards. So you can kind of build that mental buy-in without just having an event on your calendar. The other thing too that I have athletes do is, they'll come with something like the Zwift Tri Academy, right? Because that's a fun thing that they want to do in this little bit of a downtime when we're far away from races. So if you have things like that, and Natasha's going to touch on some running races here that are going to start to pop up. But if you're like, hey, I really want to do the Zwift Tri Academy, and then just tell your coach, and like they'll fit it into your schedule. They'll make one of your rides that week the Zwift ride or whatever. So if there's stuff like that that's popped up that you think would keep you motivated through this time, then use it. Like, there's no reason why you can't do that. So I just wanted to add that as we move into the off season.
Awesome. Yeah. Andrea, Keeghan.
Yeah, another big one to do is, like, with Inside Tracker, if you're tracking what's going on throughout your body through the season, a huge one is to improve any deficiencies that you might have in your blood work during the off season as well. So if you're low on iron, or you're low on any kind of blood work, is a really good time to try to work on that. Eat right to get that nutrient back in. I mean, iron's a huge one. If you're iron deficient and you're taking time off and you eat red meat, it's going to come up a lot quicker because you're not sweating, you're not doing all the stuff that would lose iron. So one thing that I would really encourage too is get your blood work done at the end of the season, see where it's at, do the off season, and then see if you can improve any numbers that you might be deficient in. Or maybe it's the other way around. You might have had too much fun and your liver enzymes are a little bit higher. So, you got to bring it back down. There's a lot of different things that I do. So I'd really encourage trying to get your blood work at the end of the season, and then also during the off season, and then try to do it again before the season if you can. And maybe that's too much, but just in the idea of checking your blood work, seeing how it can improve throughout the off season as well.
Perfect. Yeah. And on that note, many nutritionists advise that if it's a time which is tough in the off season, you kind of want to do what, eat and enjoy your time with family. But they say right now should be the time you actually want to improve body composition, because you're not fueling as much for like an Ironman block where you just have to keep up with calories. When your training is less, that's the opportunity where you can kind of dial things in per se and lose weight, and so that could be something some of you guys want to start addressing, when it's comfortable to do so. Obviously, I see we had a question come in, and so we'll check on that. So we are talking about camps right now. We're just confirming. So the question was, are we having training camp? And then I'll get to the running races. We're going to have training camp first or second week of March. And so I will send out a save the date, and then we're figuring out the details from there. It will be in Alpine again. Last year, we actually did the training camp in Austin, but we wanted to use it, especially if people are coming in, as an opportunity to really get some good bike miles outside. And we can do that better and safely in Alpine. And it's a really great team bonding experience. And so we're going to do that. It's the first or second week of March, and then we are going to do it again the end of July. We've tied it up with the music festival that happens. So that one will close with the music festival. And then running races. I got it asked today, should we do a marathon? My answer is no. The cost of a marathon far outweighs the benefit of doing a marathon. If you just had to look at the recovery of a marathon, when you run a marathon well, it's so hard on the body. And so, you know, you think of the whole build up, and you're doing these really hard run workouts, really long, hard runs as well to prepare for your best race. And around that, you can't really bike hard, swim hard. I mean, it's mostly all supportive workouts. And so you have to say, okay, if I'm going to do a marathon, I'm basically putting to the side the swim and bike for that period of time, especially as you go into the race. And then the recovery is so extreme. I know I am way more sore after a marathon from the impact of running as that hard versus an Ironman where you can't really run as hard. And so you're looking at almost 3 weeks of recovery where you can't do any hard biking. You're just recovering on the swim because your body's so shot and you can't run at all. And so now you do that in February, and now we're already into March, and we're like a month out from Ironman Texas. And how did that even benefit us? When you look at the Ironman and the execution of the Ironman, it's so different from a triathlon as the way in how you race the race. And then also the fact that an Ironman's ability is so dependent on how well you swim and bike. If you are not a good swimmer and cyclist, you are not going to run well. And so a lot of us think that I'm not running this Ironman marathon well because I'm not a good runner, when that's not the case. It's because your swim and bike is not strong enough, and maybe you didn't fuel those areas well enough. So that's something you got to ask yourself. And the reason to do a marathon is to gain confidence. If you're like, man, I really enjoy running, and I need to gain confidence that I can run this distance, that you feel is really going to carry over into racing a triathlon, well, that's an argument for you, but you have to know the cost, and you have to know it's going to be a negative for your swim and bike for that period of time. Okay. Questions? Oh, okay. They're talking about the New York Marathon, so I'm not going to go to that. And then the last thing, we got 2 minutes left. Brendan said, morning run, afternoon run. Is it beneficial? Yes, it's actually a very popular way that a lot of people train. They split up their long runs into 2. And it's because, again, it's the cost. You can get in more mileage at a lower cost, but you can also get a lot of the similar benefits gained out of essentially running in a depleted state. Your legs are tired like you would in the morning at the end of this long run. And so if you're someone that wants to try that, a lot of athletes do it where they'll do, just say you want to run 3 hours, they'll do 2 hours in the morning, and their schedule allows them to do another hour in the afternoon. And as you can also know, not only will you typically recover better, so that it's less of a cost on the body from breaking it up like that, but you also are running at the time of the day you typically will do your Ironman race at. So if people find a great benefit in that, knowing that they can go out and run in the evening. And so that could be a reason we could add that in. I used to do that with our training plans. We kind of got away with that. For a lot of people, it was really hard on their schedules to do something in the morning and then take, with their families, say like, hey, I got to go run for an hour again in the evening. And it didn't work out for a lot of people. And then it did actually ruin their next day. Like they didn't manage what was going on in between the two. So they ended up actually having a better recovery from just knocking it out first thing in the morning. And then there are a lot of benefits in getting all that time in the morning as well. So you have good, strong arguments for both, and it could be something we can try with your coach. Okay. Anyone want to add to that? Hands up. Okay. Guys, I think that's it. Just the biggest thing is get with your coach, tell them where your head is at, kind of the time of what you want to do at this moment of time, because it can be tricky. It can be tricky trying to figure out, how do we use this block, and having these conversations goes a long way in the coach helping you. So, okay. You guys have a good evening and good week. We'll see you next week.